What is going on, everybody? Today we've got a fun little one-off video. We're going to revisit my 2022 NFL draft grades fresh off of my 2024 draft grades, see where I was right, where I was wrong. Always a fun exercise because there's always people that are like, when you make draft grades, they're like, these are useless. How do we know? And I'm like, well, I mean, we do research these players and try to formulate opinions and see how these things are going to work out for these teams. So it's fun to kind of see how these, for the most part, played out. Now, of course, there's going to be a couple players here or there that were real projects that we're still kind of waiting to see. But for the most part, 2 years in, you get a sense on kind of the direction these guys are headed. And this is going to be a fun one to look back on, too, because Arif Hassan, who collects draft boards from, I think, like 78 analysts, puts together the consensus big board every year. And in 2022, I was inside the top 5 in terms of accuracy. Just kind of how my rankings played out with how it happened, how these players turned out. I don't know exactly how he calculated that. That's up for Arif to explain, but it'll be fun to look at this one as opposed to last year when we did the 2021 draft, where I was towards the bottom 5 in accuracy. So we're only getting better here in terms of accuracy. But without further ado, let's get into it. And then our next video, by the way, is going to be the release of our first deep dive for the summer. So make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss any of those team previews as we go. I think it's the best thing I bring to the table on this channel. So very excited to get that going here. But enough blabbering. Let's go ahead and dive in here. One thing I encourage you guys to do along with me here, I'm going to take out my handy dandy notepad here and just grade myself strictly on a accurate or inaccurate basis. Ideally, if I'm relatively accurate on 2 out of 3 draft grades, that's pretty damn good. So curious to see how this goes. I'm doing this live on the fly here, so I have no idea. Starting with the Chicago Bears. So I liked the combination of defensive picks at the top there. Now, why did I not like the Jaquan Brisker pick as much? I think we almost need to listen into that. Completely see what he sees in these players. So it's tough for me. I like these picks, but I also am terrified for the Bears, just as I was after free agency ended, that they're not going to give Justin Fields the help he needs. I'm terrified that they're okay with that. Okay, that's what I thought. That I thought the picks were fine, but I was worried about Fields having enough help, and I think Bears fans will relate to that, right? Like, there was offensive talent in this draft that could have been had. They went with what ended up being a slot corner and kind of a box safety. I think Brisker and Gordon have been good players, but nothing like super special, certainly not to this point. So I think that held up. I was like, it's fine, but Fields, you know? And then Velus Jones, obviously I didn't feel like he was going to be a difference maker for them because that was my takeaway from this draft. I thought it was an okay risk to take, but certainly didn't think it was guaranteed to hit there in the 3rd round. Where I did really miss, I think, was Braxton Jones. He turned into a freaking rock star. Not that I hated the draft pick or anything, but, I mean, they found a starting caliber tackle in the 5th round. That is really impressive work by them. But I think that's counterbalanced by me not liking the Dominique Robinson pick. I just didn't see it with him. I had a priority free agent grade on him. He really has struggled when he's played. So I think that was fair. This is where I'm really excited to do this next year because I have my new grading system where these day 3 picks aren't necessarily on a like ABC scale because it's just a little bit of a different process when you get later into the draft. But I would say the rest of these risks were fine, but no one I was like, oh yeah, that guy will be a starter for you. So I think the C+ grade holds up. I wasn't wowed by this draft. I thought it was fine. And I would say in terms of grading this draft, this is an accurate grade from me. And I'm curious to see how my kind of record holds up against you guys that are grading alongside with me. So we're 1-0 so far. Then we got the Detroit Lions, freaking ads. Oh, yeah. Who puts ads in a YouTube video? This piece of shit. Anyway, okay, this looks pretty good to me. I mean, loved Aiden Hutchinson. Loved Jameson Williams. That has not worked out quite as well as expected. He is one of those guys where I'm like, I'm willing to give Jameson one more year just because the injuries have kind of slowed him down out the start. But a C plus on Josh Paschal, I was like, it was a little early. I don't really see a high impact player to be taken that early. That's definitely held up. He's a fine player. He's a role player, but you're looking for starters in the top 50 of the draft or so. I didn't think they got that there, so that's fair. I liked Kirby Joseph. He was better in his rookie year than he was last year, but I think he's exceeded my B grade, but there's nothing wrong with saying that was a good pick. The rest of these, James Houston has turned into a piece for them. I hadn't watched him. But yeah, I loved Malcolm Rodriguez. He was arguably the best linebacker as a rookie in this draft class, then just kind of got replaced. They drafted Jack Campbell. That was part of why I didn't love the Jack Campbell pick, because I was like, hey, Malcolm Rodriguez was pretty good for you. They just put him on the bench, basically. So, hard to kind of argue with this one. I don't really know where you would say I was off on this, other than not having gotten to James Houston out of Jackson State. My apologies, and a credit to Brad Holmes and company for the Lions for finding him. But yeah, I think that's a hit, given that an A draft. This was a franchise-altering draft, obviously, as a part of many of their drafts have been in this new regime. All right, Packers, this is going to be a fun one because I slammed them for the Quay Walker pick, and I have continued to go at Packers fans over this. Was an F overly harsh? Maybe. So, honestly, I would stand by this. And I think my analysis of this draft is actually something I'm very proud of. I said in this video that Quay Walker would probably turn into a solid to good linebacker 2 to 3 years down the road, because that's the nature of the position. My criticism of, and Quay has yet to really prove that he's a good player. He's shown flashes. He's been more bad than good for the first 2 years of his career. I think my third round grade on who Quay was as a player has aged incredibly well. He is the definition of an athletic guy, someone you take in the third round and mold those traits. And you expect, if you're playing them the first couple of years, they're going to be a little bit late on their keys. They're going to miss some tackles. They're going to have their coverage deficiencies. That's all held up with Quay. I have no apologies about having a third round grade on Quay Walker and saying this was a massive reach. But my overall criticisms on this exceeded what I felt about Quay as a player. It was more about, you don't draft linebackers in the first round. You don't use the pick you got for Devontae Adams when you have Aaron Rodgers still trying to win a Super Bowl in Green Bay. You don't use that pick on a linebacker in a really great wide receiver class. And I felt like there were other linebackers in this draft that were better, and that held up true. I had a very similar grade on Quay as I did on Malcolm Rodriguez. I thought Leo Chanel in the Packers' backyard in the second round would have been a much better distribution of resources. He's been a stud for the Chiefs. He's been better than Quay Walker when he's played for the Chiefs. So I really think my analysis of this has played out, especially when I said, look, Quay's probably going to be a decent player because he is really athletic. He's going in the first round. He's going to play. They're going to invest in developing him. It's going to be hard for him over time to just not be a starter, but this has not returned value for the Green Bay Packers, because by the time they have to pay Quay Walker, that's when he'll actually theoretically be good. The value that they've gotten on that rookie contract hasn't been there for him. He's been a bad player for them. He really has. He's had splash moments, splash games, but for the most part, he's not been that dude. So I will stand by that F grade. Packers fans will come at me and be like, no, he's a stud. And I'm like, I just believe what I've said, and I don't think I'm being overly stubborn on that. Devontae Wyatt, they should have played him more in his rookie season, but year 2 looked very good for Devontae Wyatt. This is why we wait 2 years to do these draft grades. When he rushed the passer in year 2, he looked great. I thought that was a good pick. Hard to hit on interior defensive linemen. The Christian Watson pick, so the B plus was here because this was paired with the Quay Walker criticism. They had another second round pick in this draft. They had 2, and they packaged those 2 picks to come up for Christian Watson. And I was like, dude, just take the wide receiver at 22, have those extra second round picks. You could have walked out of here with another linebacker, maybe even Quay Walker, but it could have been Leo Chanel or some of those other guys I was saying, plus maybe like a George Pickens or, another playmaker for this offense. We saw what that Packers offense looked like this season. It was a nightmare in terms of playmakers. So I was like, look, Christian Watson at this point, totally fine, but I thought he was raw, wasn't going to be an impact out the gate. That held true. It took him towards the second half of the year to really do anything for this team. We saw week 1, he drops the over-the-shoulder touchdown and then didn't, get on Aaron Rodgers' good side until the second half of the year. So, and dealt with some injuries. So, I mean, this was a perfectly fine move. But I did have some points on that paired with the Quay Walker pick that I think have aged really well. Sean Ryan, I did give this an A. I was too high on Sean Ryan. I think he's going to have an opportunity to play, though, here in year 3, so we'll see. I did like his transition to guard, but thought it might take some time. So he is one of those more TBD picks, I think. Romeo Doubs, I liked him. Thought it was a little early, but that was an injury thing. B grade on that. I think it was understandable, but he's probably, he's been more of an A pick. He's been a really good player, so you'd flip that. But I think having an A+, like certified steal, basically on Zach Tom makes up for that. Basically saying, hey, they got a starting tackle in the 4th round. That's really hard to do. So I think that makes up for being a little low on Romeo Doubs. Kingsley Enagbare has been a good role player for them. The rest of the guys I didn't like. I had C grades on. Those guys have not hit. And then Rasheed Walker, I did like. He's turned into a starter for them as well. So, you look back on this draft, they had 1 million picks. This was an impactful draft for the Packers, but it really could have been so much more coming fresh off that Devontae Adams trade, having all those picks. And, I think B+ is fair with some of those criticisms, I think, holding up over time. They could have given Rodgers more help as they kind of bridge the gap for the future as well. So I think B+ is another accurate draft, honestly, on this one from the NFC North. Some Packers fans will disagree with that and say Quay is an A pick. I think you're crazy. I think you redo that in a heartbeat.
Wow.
All right, Minnesota Vikings. I gave this one a C-. I did not like this draft, and honestly, looking back on this, I think I kind of nailed this one too. I know I'm sounding kind of full of myself right now, but I was really low on Lewis Seen. He hasn't even been able to win a starting job as a first-round pick. I had him as kind of a late 2, early 3. I felt like he was one of those guys in that Georgia defense that just played 25 yards deep. Basically, every snap for him was like a kickoff coverage where he wasn't really covering anyone. He was just playing top down with that incredible defense doing all the work in front of him. And then it was just go run, go tackle. He did that role well, but I just didn't see the coverage feel from him. He had the long speed, but I thought he was very stiff. And obviously, they're not big fans of Lewis Seen. So I was critical of that pick. That is held up. Andrew Booth, I did think was a steal, but I was worried about the injuries, right? And that has absolutely aged for him. I think the risk was worth it, but that's just part of what we knew they were getting into when they drafted him, and that's why it was an A-, not an A. Ed Ingram, maybe year 2 certainly looked better than year 1, but year 1, he looked like a 4th, 5th round graded offensive guard, someone that I thought was overdrafted. Kind of the Quay Walker situation where it's like you invest early in the guy, you're going to play him, getting those reps, getting the focal point, being the focal point of the coaching staff like that. You're going to see some incremental growth, but even in year 2, he was far from good. He was more adequate. So I think being critical of that pick was fine. I didn't see it in Brian Asamoah, gave that a D. I mean, really the day 1 and day 2 criticism of this draft was bang on from me. Thought of Caleb Evans and Ty Chandler were the guys to keep an eye on day 3. That is held up for the most part. Odomewo is not on the team. Vidarian Lowe, I don't think, is on the team. Nick Muse is not on the team. Jalen Naylor is. He's coming along, I think, as a depth piece. But, yeah, I mean, NFC North, I would say we crushed this one. We're starting 4-0 on this one. Now, as we shift to the NFC East, I think that's going to change because this is one of those players that I just was wrong on. Tyler Smith for the Dallas Cowboys. I ended up giving the Cowboys draft a C- overall. Yeah, I mean, this one I can already tell is going to be a miss. So we're 4-1 now. Look, I didn't believe in Tyler Smith. I thought his technique was a disaster, lower level of competition. I thought he would come in for the Cowboys and kind of be a turnstile for him. He's been a Pro Bowl, nearing all-pro caliber guard. Tackle, I think they're going to keep him at guard. because they just drafted Tyler Guyton. So, maybe eventually with Terrence Steele, they end up with Smith at tackle somewhere. But I was wrong on Tyler Smith. Like, I'll hold my hand up. I didn't want to gamble on the traits, and that's exactly what I said when they took Tyler Guyton. I was like, look, I didn't like Tyler Smith. That worked out for them. We'll see how this one plays out. So I was wrong there. And then Sam Williams, he's been better than this. He's been a pleasant surprise. Now, I think that system is like the perfect spot for him to have landed, where he can just use his speed and bend and be that kind of designated pass rusher. He's still a guy that hasn't really turned into a starter for them, but he has shown just better pass rush finesse than I thought he was going to have coming out of that weird Ole Miss system. He's got, some spins and different ways to get after the quarterback. So he's definitely been more of a good pick for them. Jalen Tolbert, I thought was a fine pick in the third. He hasn't really worked out for them. The one good thing I did have on this draft is I compared, literally written down for me, Jake Ferguson is Dalton Schultz. And that's exactly what happened. I think he sat behind Schultz for a year, right? And then just plug and play Dalton Schultz replacement. So I kind of nailed that eval. Doesn't make up for what I did at the top of the draft, though. And I didn't see it in Deron Bland. I didn't get to his tape. Maybe if I did, I would have liked him, but I gave that one a C. That's where it's definitely helpful that we, now on day 3, we just have like solid pick or whatever. But even then, I would have thought he was kind of out of left field. But yeah, I like Damone Clark. Had some injury questions coming out. He's been a solid player for them. John Ridgeway has gotten some snaps for Washington. They let him go really early. But yeah, this draft has been better than a C-. This one's going to be a miss for me. We're 4-1. Then we got the New York Giants. I was wrong on this one as well. Pretty much down the board. I think day 3, my analysis was fine, but Kayvon Thibodeau, I was too high on him, I think. I really dismissed, and Orion, nice typo. I really dismissed all of the criticism of his kind of, he had like character questions, and I think it was like work behavior type of questions. And I think there's just a little something missing with Kayvon Thibodeau. He's had a lot of sack production, a lot of schemed up blitz looks, and I could so easily sit here and be like, see, I was right on Kayvon Thibodeau. The sack numbers are there. I don't think so. I mean, the pass rush win rate has been very poor. The Wink Martindale system did him a lot of favors in terms of the blitzing aggressiveness, creating those open looks, or just, a linebacker gets through unblocked, the quarterback rolls out, and then Thibodeau is able to just, release chase and tackle, and he gets the sack when he didn't really do all that much. So you're still hoping to see some gains from him into year 3, but I thought he was going to be like a slam dunk, like defensive player of the year type of candidate. And it just hasn't been that for him. So I was wrong there. And then, dude, I loved Evan Neal. I was kind of on board with Evan Neal as a potential number 1 overall pick in this draft. And I bet the Giants were too, but completely wrong on his foot speed and how that was going to impact, his transition to the next level. I'd be lying if I didn't say, like, Evan Neal is the reason J.C. Latham scares me, because I see how Evan Neal is losing in the pros, and it's that kind of missing that hitch in his hips and the inability to kind of keep up with these pass rushers at the next level with his feet. I see so much of that with J.C. Latham, who just came to the Titans as the 7th overall pick out of Alabama, but was wrong there. I hated the Wan'Dale Robinson pick. I still think it was a little early for Wan'Dale, and there's other receivers I would have gone with in this draft, but he's been better than an F. He's been more of a C+, B- pick for them. Josh Azwedu, that was fine. That was a fine enough risk, but was a little early. He has not been a good player for them. Cordale Flott, he's been okay as a starter. They've been playing him. I don't think he's proven to be a starting caliber player yet. Maybe this year. Like Daniel Bellinger, they ended up kind of replacing him with Waller, and he's been okay. He's definitely a guy that's still learning the position. He was very raw coming out. And then, down the board, didn't really hit on any of these guys, but I thought the process was fine. They ended up walking out of here with Micah McFadden as a starter for them. He's been pretty solid. So, yeah, I missed on the New York Giants draft. We are 0-2 in the NFC East. Then we got the Eagles here. Jordan Davis, I almost want to say to be determined on this one. It's been a crowded room with Fletcher Cox continuing to kind of eat up a lot of snaps there. He has not been worth this pick for them yet. I still don't think they would redo the pick. I think they're hoping for big gains from him and that him and Jalen Carter can really take that leap this year. So that one is, a situation where it's a position that can take a few years to really get there. It's probably, looking back on it, more of like a B pick. It's not that Davis has been bad. It's just that he hasn't been that like game wrecker that they were hoping to get. But I mean, yeah, A+ to use the 18th pick for AJ Brown. That's altered the course of the Philadelphia Eagles. Cam Jurgens gave that a B+. I think, he was solid last year in his first year as a starter. His trajectory is very much on par for what they expected there. Hope they kick him back into center because I think that's his natural position. I think he could really thrive there this year, have that breakout. So I don't think I would redo that grade. Nakobe Dean, for a mid-range third-round linebacker, I thought he's been exactly what I thought he would be. I was really low on Nakobe Dean. I think he's a player that is, I mentioned I ranked really well with the Arif Hassan consensus board. Nakobe Dean, everybody loved. People are like, that's a top 32 player in the draft. And I was like, he's more in the 60s for me. Like, he runs around. He's undersized. He's not uber fast. I was much lower on Nakobe Dean. I had a take where I was like, Malcolm Rodriguez, Nakobe Dean. Give me Rodriguez in the 4th over Nakobe Dean in like the early 2nd where people had him going. He ends up going much closer to where I would have drafted him, and he's been fine. He's had a lot of injuries. He might be starting for them this year. And, honestly, if mid third round linebacker, if year 3 he has a breakout, that's kind of what I would have hoped for with him anyway. Kyron Johnson hasn't really done much for them. And then Grant Calcaterra has been a useful kind of move tight end for them. So I think the A grade on the Eagles is perfectly fine here. Jordan Davis, very much a little more wait and see. But, even if Jordan Davis is just a fine starter, not a superstar, I think our analysis on this draft was still pretty good. And I'm proud to say I wasn't like glazing up Howie Roseman for the Nakobe Dean pick. I thought it was a good pick, but a lot of people were like, oh my God, they stole the best linebacker in the draft in the 3rd round. I was like, I don't know about that. So I think that sets it over to be a hit for me. And then we wrap up the East with the Commanders. And on first sight, this looks pretty good for me. Jahan Dotson, I think my criticism was like, okay, it's a fine pick. I'm not going to slam them for this, but I was like, I thought they had other needs. I thought, Commanders fans were like crying for another wide receiver. I was like, you got Terry, you got Curtis Samuel, you got, I liked Diami Brown, who still continued to kind of splash and make plays as wide receiver 4 for the Commanders. I'm still waiting on Diami Brown to get a legitimate opportunity in terms of playing time and real quarterback play, which has not been present in Washington. Dotson's been a fine player for them. Year 1 looked a lot better than year 2. I still think he's got that sort of Emmanuel Sanders type of potential. I think the B- on this was fine looking back on it. Fedarian Mathis, I thought was way too early. He's basically been a bust for them. He's been a complete non-factor. They have now buried him as like the 4th or 5th piece on that D-line for this year. Brian Robinson, I thought was a fine enough pick. This would probably go up a little bit. He's been a better player than I thought he would be. He's got a little more juice than I remembered seeing at Alabama. So I would say I was a little too low on Brian Robinson. Percy Butler I thought would compete. He's gotten some playing time. Nothing special, but was a fine pick. Loved the risk on Sam Howell in the 5th round. I think a 2nd round grade on Sam Howell has been pretty solid. The more tape I've seen from him, the worse I think he is, honestly. Like, he's such a backup quarterback in the sense of pocket presence, bailing out of clean pockets, not feeling the rush, not taking time to survey the field. So he definitely has a long way to go if he's ever going to be a starter again. But still well worth the risk in the 5th round to kind of see what you could get there. And then, late draft pick risks, they've essentially been on par. Chris Paul's gotten some playing time, but he is not what Tyler Smith is. I'll say that out of Tulsa, his running mate there. Cole Turner's made some catches, but I think B- on this draft was totally fair. You would probably redo those first 2 picks for them, which was kind of where that B- came from. So I would say we hit on that, and through 2 divisions, we are 6-2. So we are so far 3 out of 4. We got some wiggle room if I'm aiming for 66% hit rate on these. All right, Buffalo Bills. I gave this a C+. I wasn't the biggest Kyer Elam guy. I definitely felt like they missed out on Trent McDuffie. That has aged well. James Cook has been better than a C. I wouldn't say he's been... I felt like this was a luxury pick, and there was other directions you probably could have gone. I don't think you necessarily redo that pick. It's, again, been better than a C, so I would say I was a little wrong there, but I think being a little more right on Kyer Elam, being a pretty risky prospect, that probably evens out. Definitely too low on Terrell Bernard, though. He's been a good starter for them, so I was simply too low there. I missed on Christian Benford. Didn't get to his tape out of Villanova, but he's been a starter for them. And Khalil Shakir has definitely been a hit there in the 5th round, but I will give myself a miss on this Bills draft because Cook's been better than I thought he would be for them. And then, Cook's been a better runner than I thought he would be. And then Terrell Bernard has been a very capable starter for them. So a little more simple on this one, but I would say I'm off base there. The Dolphins, I mean, this one's going to be quick too, because I basically was like, I don't think they had a draft. And that's essentially what happened here. We might as well not have graded this. Channing Tindall was the one guy I was like, 3rd round, give him some time. He might turn into a player. That's still going to be, a 3 or a 4 year projection on him. I thought the risk was totally fine. And then the rest of these guys didn't really see anything. So I guess we'll just say accurate on that. It's almost like you don't count this one, but let's not count it. Let's say 31 draft classes happened this year. And this was this the year they lost their 1st round pick as well? I can't remember if that was this year or the year after. All right. New England Patriots. Didn't love this draft class. It hasn't really been a franchise-altering draft for them. Cole Strange, I liked Cole Strange, but I still thought it was early. He definitely has not been a first-round guard in terms of, if you take an interior offensive lineman in the 1st round, you want that to be, a quality starter. He's been fine. He's been more of a 2nd or 3rd round guy. Okay, Tyquan Thornton, I get it. He has not been an impact for the Patriots. It's looking more like the consensus was right on him as more of a 4th or a 5th round guy in this huge reach. I will say I was too high on him, but a piece of me is still going to sit here and say, look, man, I said it when the Patriots drafted him too. I was like, this is not a great spot in terms of the quarterback he gets to work with. They don't push the ball downfield, and that was his game. It was like he was the Marquez Valdez-Scantling in this draft. I still think in the right situation he can do that. I see him get open on tape. He's had some drop issues. It pains me to say I was wrong there, but in my heart of hearts, I will say this was more of a landing spot situation. I still think he could have been a capable deep threat, and maybe he still could. It reminds me a little bit, was it like Darius Hayward-Bay? Some of these other deep threats, like a Ted Ginn Jr., 4 or 5 years into their career, they actually kind of turned into capable players, but still got that bust label because they were drafted too high. I wouldn't be surprised if that happens with Tyquan Thornton, whether that's here with Drake May throwing him the football or he goes and gets to work with Patrick Mahomes someday. We'll see in time. Marcus Jones, I liked him in the 3rd round. I think I compared him to K'Wan Williams or something, but I liked him as a slot corner. He's been really good when he's played. I'm excited for Marcus Jones. I think that B is held up. Jack Jones, better player than a D+. He just hasn't really done that for the Patriots. He had a couple really good games there. They ended up releasing him. Obviously D plus was too low, but it's not like this was an A pick for the Patriots either. They haven't gotten that much out of him. His off-field stuff kind of ran him out of New England. Now, if this was the Raiders picking him in the 4th round, you would say that's an A because he's kind of settled in as a good fit there. Pierre Strong, I was probably too high on him, though when he's played, when he's gotten opportunities, he's produced. I thought Cleveland should have used him a lot more. I didn't think New England should have traded him off. His yards per attempt, he makes guys miss. I don't really understand why he doesn't get the football more. So I'll say I whiffed on that, but also it's a frustrating usage situation, and it's like he hasn't really gotten a chance to show it. Like, I'm pulling him up right now. He, in his rookie year, had an 83.8 PFF rushing grade. He had 100 yards on 10 carries. And then for Cleveland last year, 4.6 yards per attempt. Wasn't super efficient, but I still thought he was maybe better than Ford, who was getting all the touches there. So I don't know. I mean, I still think he's got potential as a 4th round pick, but I was clearly too high on him. Bailey Zappi had his time in the sun. I still thought it was too early and they had other needs. I think that has probably been true. Kevin Harris hasn't turned into much there. I thought they just didn't need another running back. That's definitely been true. The rest of these guys, kind of whatever. I think the final grade of a C on this holds up, and I was higher on this draft class than others. I thought Cole Strange would at least be a starter. I liked Marcus Jones. This one's tough because the Patriots offense has been just such a wasteland that guys like Strong and Thornton didn't really have a chance to succeed here. I don't know. I'm curious what you guys say on this one. I think the grade on this was more accurate than not, so I'm gonna go with an accurate grade on that one for the Patriots. That's a tough one. Then we got the Jets. I was too low on Sauce. Not that I didn't like the pick, but I was too low on Sauce. I just was. No way around it. Garrett Wilson, though, was one of my favorites in this draft. I said the Jags should have taken him number 1. That aged well. Loved Breece Hall. Jermaine Johnson as a B+, I think is perfectly fine. It's a good pick. Nothing wrong with it. Not a slam dunk or anything, but he's been a good player for them in a very good scheme for him to succeed. Jeremy Ruckert, I think we're still probably a year away from seeing if he can be a starter. Max Mitchell has gotten some playing time, and for a 4th round pick, he's exceeded what you typically get from a 4th rounder there. I was too low on Michael Clemens. I think we'll split the difference here. If I gave myself accurate on the Patriots, I'll say inaccurate on the Jets. Although I gave it an A. The final grade was an A. I don't know, man. Kind of hard to say this is an inaccurate draft grade. I mean, this altered the course of their organization. I thought they walked out with 4 really good players. They did. Just Sauce was a little bit better. Well, a lot better than I thought he would be. So I don't know. We've probably given myself some benefit of the doubt to this point. So we'll go miss on this just because I was a little too low on them, considering just how great this draft class was for them. So we are 6-4 heading into our next division here. Got a little bit of ground to make up, but we're doing okay. The Baltimore Ravens are up. I just got to find where the final grade is here. I really hyped this draft class up. Man, it's kind of looking like a miss on this from my analysis of it because the players I liked haven't really worked out. I'm going to put that in as a miss right now. It's funny because I loved the final grade. I thought they freaking nailed this draft. But yeah, I think when you look at where my criticisms were, it has not aged well. Like Kyle Hamilton, I did say he was going to the perfect spot. And that's just one of those things I just have to take on the chin. I still believe if Kyle Hamilton went to a different situation that asked him to be an actual safety, he certainly wouldn't be what he's been for the Ravens. I will stand by that. There's nuance to this. Like, he plays a very specific kind of lurking slot corner, quasi-linebacker role that most teams wouldn't have put him into. That was exactly what I said he had to do, was like a supercharged Jaron Curse. That's exactly what he does for the Ravens, plus a little bit more. But obviously, this was an amazing pick for the Ravens. Much better than a B. He's been, an all-pro impact for that defense in that role that they have for him. So, they nailed that pick. And then, Tyler Linderbaum has been an absolute smashing hit, and Hollywood Brown hasn't quite been as good as, I kind of stuck my neck out for Hollywood a little bit. I still think Hollywood's a good player, and it's going to have a monster season for the Chiefs, and I could see a playoff game where Hollywood Brown just destroys the Ravens. But still, you would do this trade all over again if you're the Ravens, not having to pay Hollywood, getting Tyler Linderbaum on a cheap rookie contract. And then Ojabo was one of my favorite picks that they made here, and the injuries, man. He tore his ACL again last year. He fell to the second round because of those injury risks, and it just has not been there for him. Maybe he can still hit in time, but I don't think they're really counting on Ojabo at this point, so that's not been an A-plus pick for them. And Travis Jones into the third round, it's been more of an A pick than an A-plus. I thought he could have been like a first-round talent on the D-line. I don't know that he's necessarily been that, but he's been a very good player for them. It's not like I was dead wrong on that, but I probably oversold that. Daniel Falele, we'll see this year. He's going to compete with Rosengarten at right tackle, so that's definitely to be determined. I still think the risk in the fourth round was well worth it. But again, I loved Jalen Armour-Davis. He has been a flop. I loved Charlie Kolar. Another guy where it's like, I loved the player, but he's buried behind Mark Andrews and Isaiah Likely, who I was too low on. So, you're kind of getting the point here. Like, this was a huge draft for them, but I do think I oversold it a little bit. And, the franchise-altering aspects of this draft were really Kyle Hamilton, Tyler Linderbaum, and probably Isaiah Likely, who's a really good player that they found in the fourth round that I only gave a B. So, I think it's not that my final grade is wrong on this, but it's wrong for the wrong reasons. So we're going to go miss on that one for the Ravens. Okay, Cleveland Browns. Martin Emerson, I got to get the final grade here. Hold on. I gave this a C-. So I think this looks pretty accurate. Martin Emerson I thought was a good pick. He's been better than I thought. I'll admit that, but I hated these picks. I didn't see it with Alex Wright. He has done basically nothing for them. He's had some schemed up production with all that talent around him in a system that's going to scheme pretty much anybody open in that role. But I thought that was way too early. I really did not see the David Bell agenda. That's probably another guy that helped my consensus board rankings because he was kind of a top 100 guy. And I was like, this dude cannot really thrive at the next level. Now, as a big slot, like a role player, sure. But I thought third round was way too early for that guy. Perion Winfrey, I think, is still a work in progress. Really good athlete. I hated his play strength and his run defense. I'm not going to say you would necessarily redo that pick, but it definitely hasn't been an A. Definitely a guy that was expected to take some time, so it's hard to be overly critical of that. The Cade York pick, I gave that a D. I was like, why are you taking a kicker here in the fourth? He has not been their kicker, so that's held up well. Jerome Ford in the fifth round, he's been a starter for them. Not that I thought I was obsessed with Jerome Ford or anything, but that pick's been fine. The rest of those guys, I didn't really see it. Mike Woods, I had undrafted free agent, like this guy is not an NFL caliber player basically grade, because I have PFA grades and then I have UDFA grades. The PFA is like, if he falls, that's a priority target for you to get him into your camp. UDFA, it's like, probably going to end up in the UFL. So definitely nailed that on Mike Woods. I think where the players that I thought stunk in this draft have for the most part stunk. I think that's going to be an accurate grade for me on the Browns. Then we have the Steelers, and I missed the Bengals in here too. There's the Bengals right there. This one's interesting. Some hits, some misses. This one's going to be tough. So Daxton Hill, I loved Daxton Hill. He hasn't been a huge hit. I don't think this was a miss either, though. He was fine as a free safety. Year one, he sat, right? We knew that was going to happen when they took him, so that was baked in. Heading into year three, Still kind of TBD on Dax. He might go and play outside corner, which I mentioned for him. Like, I was like, dude, he could be a Byron Jones type where, like, he has incredible man-to-man skills. He's got the size. I'm curious to see if he could be like a supercharged slot corner for them. I'm not ready to say Dax Hill is a flop yet. He's had one starting season and had his ups and downs. He made some plays as well. So that one's interesting. But Cam Taylor-Britt, I was dead ass wrong on. Like, he's been a really good starter for them. So, like, just completely missed on him. Because I actually watched him and was not impressed. He's been a very good starter for them and is only going to continue to get better, I think. Then you got Zach Carter. This is where I was right. I had a priority free agent grade on Zach Carter. I didn't even think he was draftable. They took him in the 3rd round. I slammed them for this. And I think I should give myself credit for that. I think a lot of people see these 3rd round picks like, okay, yeah, Zach Carter, 3rd round pick. Maybe he turns into a rotational player. I think if I actually really stick my neck out and be like, no, they literally threw that pick in the trash can and stick my neck out, I think I should get some decent credit for that. I watched the guy. I thought he stunk. I thought he was way overdrafted. And that's exactly been what he's been. Like, they just drafted multiple defensive tackles to get his ass off the field. So I'm going to give myself some credit for that one. I think that's fair. And then Cordell Volson, again, I didn't think he was draftable. I gave that a D. Another situation where it's like, he's been playing. He's getting a lot of reps. They're desperately hoping he's going to turn into a decent player. Ultimately, I'll say I was wrong on him. He's been better than don't draft the guy. I still think they should get him off the field. He's been a problem for them more than he's been an asset for them, but I will say I was wrong there. So, we had 2 misses here. Daxton Hill has yet to really prove to be an A. And then Zach Carter, I was right. So ultimately, I don't know, man. I mean, this is still, it's probably better than a C- draft. They had 6 picks. They got maybe a starting guard if he gets better again next year. They got a good corner. They got Dax. I will say I missed on this one, being critical, but I'm curious what you guys would grade that one. Then we have the Pittsburgh Steelers. So, okay, B- on Kenny Pickett. I'll actually stand by that. I was like, this pick's fine. I had a 2nd round grade on Kenny Pickett. I think he's shown to be a 2nd round quarterback. The Steelers did the worst possible job. Like, they wrote the book on how not to support your young quarterback. They had the worst offensive coordinator in the league. The offensive line was bad. And then, so like, as a rookie, I thought Kenny Pickett had an adequate rookie season. Like, he didn't look great, didn't look horrible, right? I think his interception numbers were way overstated. He got some really bad luck with interceptions in his first year. But then you get to last season, and, he doesn't look great, for sure. But they finally fire Matt Canada. Kenny Pickett has a really good start, I think, against the Bengals. Looked really good. Then he gets hurt. They go to Mason Rudolph, and Mason Rudolph looks pretty good. But wasn't that because you fired Matt Canada? Wasn't that the point? Like, this coordinator is so absolutely garbage. And then they just never went back to Kenny Pickett. I felt like, especially if they were considering moving off of Kenny Pickett this year, they at least owed it to him to put him back in at the end of the year, see if he's got a little playoff magic in him instead of Mason Rudolph, who you know what he is. I mean, I really think they did Kenny Pickett dirty, and he had every right to be kind of pissed. And, they said like, oh, Kenny Pickett didn't handle how Pittsburgh handled him at the end of his, tenure there. How could you? They completely screwed him over. And I never thought Kenny Pickett was going to be anything great, but I do think in a different world, he could have been Derek Carr-ian, and maybe he still can. Like, to me, he's in Philadelphia now, which is like a dream situation for a quarterback. I could definitely see if Jalen Hurts gets hurt for an extended period of time, Kenny Pickett can come back in. He's still young and draw some appeal to another team as a potential kind of bridge starter. So I think B-, like, we had obvious criticisms where, like, yeah, I mean, he's probably never going to be a star quarterback for you. We knew that, but I don't know what else they would have done at quarterback in this time frame. Like, their other option was Mitch Trubisky. So I'll stand by the B- there. We love Pickens. That's worked. DeMarvin Leal certainly was always going to take some time. So I think the risk was fine, but he hasn't really done much for them yet to this point. Calvin Austin, I was too high on there. Although the quarterback play, the play calling, I think Calvin Austin could impress this year with Arthur Smith. I think he's got a good role there. And it's also been injuries with Calvin Austin. I don't think he's shown us that he can't play. So at the end of the 4th round, I don't think you would redo that pick for the Steelers. I think they're still happy he's on the roster. Connor Hayward's a fun fullback. That's a good pick. I think this draft grade has held up. And, we didn't like Oladokin, or I had a non-NFL grade on him. He has not been really anything in the NFL. Mark Robinson, I didn't see it. So I think this draft has held up very solid. We're going to go accurate on the Steelers there to wrap up the AFC North. All right, Falcons. This one I can already tell is an easy miss. I was wrong on this draft. Drake London, yes, I would have taken Garrett Wilson, and I would still take Garrett Wilson over Drake London. And that criticism has held up, but he's been a much better player than I projected. He's a stud. I thoroughly enjoy Drake London. He's a guy that, like, I watch him on the Falcons. He's kind of like opened my mind back up on these bigger bodied wide receivers, because for years it was like N'Keal Harry, Hakeem Butler, like all these big bodied wide receivers weren't working in the first round. Drake London comes in, he's like, yeah, I'm not a burner, but I'm gonna kick your ass. And like, that basketball background really shows with him. I'm a huge fan of his game. He's a much better route runner than I ever gave him credit. I said he was a good route runner, but I kind of dismissed it as like, yeah, but he's not fast. He won't be able to separate. He's really capable at setting guys up and creating, small spaces of separation. He's not gonna stack you and like destroy you over the top like Garrett Wilson can. But he does separate. He's a really good player, man. I was wrong on him. I will happily hold my hand up there. And Arnold Ebiketie, he has not been an A-plus pick, man. He's been fine. He's been about what you expect maybe from a second-round edge rusher paired with some injuries, but I was too high there. I like Troy Anderson. I think a B grade for a developmental late second-round guy is fine. I think we're still kind of waiting to see on him. He has been passed up by some other guys that are just better run defenders now. But I'm not quite ready to give up on Troy Anderson. It's a tough position. But then Desmond, okay, this is where this gets really tough. And like the record that I'm jotting down here, at the end of the day, it's more of just a fun thought experiment. Because while I was wrong at the top here, dude, we got 3 really good takes here. I mean, I slammed the Falcons for this Desmond Ridder pick, and I went at it with Falcons fans on this. I really did, because I was like, in a vacuum, taking Desmond Ridder in the 3rd round is fine. But, dude, I really nailed this, man. I was like, this is the worst possible quarterback the Falcons could have taken, because what's going to happen, I predicted this whole thing out. I was like, you are going to waste the next 2 years of your quarterback room because you went with Desmond Ridder. And this got Arthur Smith fired. Like, this right here is what got Arthur Smith fired. So, like, ultimately, this might be a hit of a draft grade, because I was like, okay, you're going to start Mariota halfway through the year. You're going to put in Desmond Ridder. He's going to look adequate because he's Desmond Ridder. He was like, had a decent enough baseline as a prospect. And then I was like, you're going to be talked into Desmond Ridder as your quarterback for the next year. He's going to play, and then ultimately you're going to decide he's not good enough. And you're going to be sitting here 2 years from now, and you end up paying Kirk Cousins and drafting Michael Penix 8th overall because you just had 2 years of Desmond Ridder. So I was like, this pick makes no sense for the window of the Falcons. I was like, at least take Matt Corral or Sam Howell, where it's going to be a little bit more clear, I thought, on if they're good or bad. So, dude, absolutely, you would regret the Desmond Ridder pick. You would not make that pick again. Arthur Smith certainly would not make that pick again. And then I thought D'Angelo Malone was like a a 6th round flyer type of guy. I gave that a D-. He's been horrible for them. So that's aged really well. And then I loved Tyler Algier as a 5th round pick, who's been a monster for them. So, gosh, I think that, especially when part of the Drake London criticism was how high I was on Garrett Wilson, I think at the end of the day, there was more good in here than bad, don't you think? I mean, I think we actually go accurate on this one for the Falcons. I do. I certainly look back on this and I'm proud of what I said about Desmond Ridder, because like I said, man, you do not make that pick again. All right, then the Carolina Panthers. Kind of a non-draft here, honestly, because they had the icky pick and then a very late 3rd and a bunch of day 3 guys. I gave it an A. It hasn't been an A draft for them because we gave myself the hit on the last draft. I'll come back and give myself a miss on this one. I will say, I still believe in Ike Ekwonu. Rookie year looked very promising, and he was even a better pass protector in his rookie year than I thought he was ever going to be. Well, not ever going to be, but certainly in his rookie year. And then we saw what happened last year. I mean, everybody underperformed. Everyone was dragging each other down last year, whether it was the O-line or Bryce or the receivers. It was just this massive pool of suck. I think Icky getting capable guard play next to him is going to be a big deal next year. So I still think I'm not going to say you necessarily stick by Icky, but I don't think it's like a redo. I think he's going to be just fine. We'll see. But, I mean, Matt Corral, this was always going to be a worth the risk pick. And they didn't really give him a chance, obviously. They drafted him, didn't play him. They, go and get Baker after the fact. So, this was poorly handled. But Matt Corral's not very good either. He's been playing in the UFL. I actually don't know how he's playing in the UFL. I still think the risk was worth it, but this was never going to be a situation that was going to work out for him. Like, how they handled this was really poor. End of the 3rd round, I still think it's fine when you're trying to just find something at quarterback. This was pre-Bryce Young and all that, so, you're not going to say A+ on this. I kind of liked the risks they took on these hyper athletes on day 3, but they just weren't good football players. It's a reminder, you still need good football players. Like, Kalen Barnes has been nothing. Amari Barno's been absolutely nothing. Brandon Smith, another situation where they needed to show more patience with him. They cut him after a year. It's like, well, what did you expect when you took Brandon Smith? He was very similar to me to was it Wallace out of Kentucky this year that went in the 3rd round? Very similar to that, where it's like he has got to the Panthers. Wallace went to the Panthers. But the old regime just gave him no patience. So I still think the process was fine, but how they handled it was horrible. This draft has been completely marred by how big of a disaster the Panthers have been. But because we gave myself a hit on the last one, I'll say this was a miss because I guess, Matt Corral. But maybe I'm being a little too hard on myself. But ultimately, this has not been an A draft for the Panthers. At the end of the day, that final grade should count for something. And that was obviously wrong. All right, the New Orleans Saints. I gave this draft a B. I think this has been a B draft for them, especially when you factor in the draft picks that were traded to make this stuff happen. And that's where this was baked in. I thought the Chris Olave pick was fine. He's been a little better than I expected. Not that I didn't like Chris Olave. He's been closer to a number 1 than I thought. I don't think he's proven that he's a true number one, but he's a 1 of 2 type of wide receiver at least. But the thing is here, they gave up a future 1st round pick to make this happen, and they had to get the tackle, right? So that was all kind of baked in here. It's like, okay, Chris Olave, and they gave up a couple extra picks too to move up for Chris Olave. They gave up just off the top of my head, I think they gave up a future 1st. I think they gave up a future 2nd in there as well. What that might have been in the Chris Olave trade up. So I think they gave a future second to come up for Olave and a future first to come up for Penning. So yeah, it was just like really aggressive to get those two players, and I was like, I don't hate it, but I certainly was like, Trevor Penning, like that was the guy you had to have. That's where I was like, kind of torn on this. I think ultimately being kind of 1 foot in, 1 foot out on that whole process has been fine analysis. Now, I was wrong on Alontae Taylor. He's been a really good player. They hit on him. And then a little too high on Jordan Jackson probably there in the 6th round. So I'll go benefit of the doubt against me and say I was wrong on this. Not that it was horrible. But with Alontae Taylor being a C there, I think we got to say this was a miss in terms of my draft grades. Trevor Penning definitely has not been good, to say the least. The Bucs, best pick of the draft on Zion McCollum. Bold take, Marcus. This is why I've revised. That's probably the literal reason why I've revised my grading criteria, because that would just be a certified steal now. A little dramatic to say best pick of the draft. But anyway, on this draft, I still think this is aged pretty well. What do we go final grade here? B? Yeah, this has been a B draft for them. I'm going to say this one's a hit. Just looking at this. So, Logan Hall, hated this pick. He was the guy, like, I was terrified my Packers were going to take. And when the Bucs took him for Tom Brady, I was like, whew, thank God they missed. And he's not good. So that has aged well. Top of the 2nd round. He had some upside. I thought it was like decent enough risk, I guess, but definitely not the direction I would have gone. Luke Gedeke, I liked Luke Gedeke. The Bucs liked Luke Gedeke even more. There was a good take involved on this B grade because I actually was kind of like, I felt like Luke Gedeke was my guy in this draft, and he went even higher than I thought. So I was on to something there. I just didn't go quite far enough on him because he's turned into a really good tackle for them. He sucked at guard to start, but looks like he's going to be a kind of quote-unquote franchise right tackle, if you will, or at least a good right tackle. Rachaad White in the 3rd round. My criticisms on Rachaad White was I didn't like his running, and that has aged well. I think they're still looking for any semblance of a rushing threat. They didn't find that in Rachaad White. He has been better as a receiving back, than I maybe even projected, but I loved his receiving. It was like really about the rushing with Rachaad White that I wasn't a fan of, and I think that's aged well. Cade Otton, I thought they found a starting tight end in the 4th round. They did. Jake Camarda is still their punter. I think he's been whatever, but 4th round for a punter, like, all right. Zion McCollum. All right, did I go over the top here and say best pick of the draft? Yes, absolutely. But he's still probably going to start for them heading into year 3. He was always going to be a little more of a needs some time coming out of Sam Houston State, but freaky traits. I still think he could prove to be a good starting corner as a 5th round pick. There's a lot of corners that go in the 2nd round that haven't even been as good as Zion McCollum's been to this point. So I was over dramatic there saying best pick of the draft, but I did think they found a potential starter in the 5th, and they have. He's, I think, going to be out there week 1 for them. So overall, there's some slight differences in terms of how I projected these guys, but I think for the most part, this was an accurate grade on the Bucs. Okay, Houston Texans. I really liked this draft. I think this one's a miss, though, man. Looking at it, they just haven't really hit on these picks like I thought they were going to. Derek Stingley, look, the fact that Sauce Gardner exists hurts to stomach a little bit, but he's still had a great 2nd year. He's had some injuries, which is a part of it. I don't think they necessarily take that one back. Yes, you would redo it and take Sauce, but they still are happy to have Derek Stingley. But the rest of these, man, Kenyon Green had a horrible rookie season. Granted, he missed year 2, so he could still prove to be a good guard for them, but I don't know that they're counting on that. Jalen Petrie has actually, I thought he was a really high floor player. he's kind of been bad. They just drafted a couple defensive backs. They're kind of looking to age him out already. He just hasn't been worth that pick. No way around it. He's missed tackles. He hasn't been much of an impact in coverage. John Mechie had the cancer situation, obviously set him back, and now they've just kind of buried him on the depth chart, but he certainly hasn't been worth the 12th overall pick. Christian Harris has shown his flashes. I think that pick was fine. Dameon Pierce looked really good, but hasn't been able to stay healthy. Day 3 is what it is. I was too high on this draft. They took some guys we liked, and it hasn't worked out for them. So that one's a miss. Then the Indianapolis Colts gave this draft an A. Loved what they did, especially when they didn't have that first round pick from the Carson Wentz trade. So Alec Pierce as an A- grade. He's been borderline. He definitely hasn't been a slam dunk pick. Jelani Woods has had a hard time staying healthy, but he's looked phenomenal when he's played. And then Bernard Raymond, I gave an A+. And he has been an A+. Someone that looked like a franchise tackle in year 2 in the middle of the 3rd round, like that is basically stealing a first round pick out of this draft. So I love that. Nick Cross, I gave an A. I know that doesn't look great, but he was 20 years old when he got drafted. He still has an opportunity there. It's not a surprise that he hasn't played a lot yet. And I think the risk at the end of the 3rd round, you still do that all over again. Eric Johnson, I thought, could get in the mix, but wasn't anything special. And then these guys, well, Rodney Thomas actually, I never got around to his tape. He's actually been a safety for them. He's been all right. Ogletree's gotten some playing time and looked okay as well. So, I think we say this is a hit because the main thing here was how much we love Bernard Raymond and really how well these guys were going to kind of fit. I think we still have the best is yet to come on Jelani Woods. I really do believe that. The injury really set him back. And Nick Cross, again, like he's only 22 years old. He's younger than like most of the safeties in this most recent draft class. So, and they traded a future pick to come and get Nick Cross because they knew it was going to take a couple years. They wanted to get that development started. But a really rare athlete. So I think this is fine. Alec Pierce maybe a little bit too high, but I think we're going to go accurate there on the Colts. Then we've got the Jacksonville Jaguars. Gave this draft an F, and I think that's been totally fair. I mean, the Trayvon Walker pick at the top of the draft, the only reason this was a D and not an F is because we knew like in 3 or 4 years he might turn into a good player. We're still waiting to see that. Jags fans will take that sack total and shove it in your face. Look, if you play as many snaps as Trayvon Walker played because he was the number 1 overall pick, and you play in a stunting, looping defense like he's been in, you're eventually going to walk into some sacks. But he's like, I think he's 66th in pass rush win rate out of 118 or something like that. He has not been worth the number 1 pick. He's looked much closer to what a early 2nd round edge rusher would look like if he played that much. The guys I bring up are like Sam Hubbard and DJ Wanham for the Vikings, like examples of guys that are like they're low-end number 2 edge guys. They play a million snaps, and yeah, they're going to walk into 8 to 10 sack seasons. There's so much more to look at in the year 2024 than just those raw sack numbers. The other thing is he hasn't been the dominant run defender that they expected to get out of him. So this has been a D pick through and through. You would 100% have to go with my take on this was just take Garrett Wilson. There's no reason wide receivers with what they're getting paid shouldn't be deemed worthy of being the number 1 pick. But I thought other guys would have been better here too. So that's held up. Devin Lloyd was a C pick here. I think that had something to do with, just not being a huge need and, the fact that it got Chad Muma later. I thought, like, get yourself some wide receiver action in a good wide receiver class, line help. I was like, it just felt like a luxury pick that they didn't have. It's probably been better than that. He had a good year 2 and good flashes in year 1. But, he's been a solid player. It's probably more of a B. But then really kind of nailed this idea of like, okay, Luke Fortner is bad. You overdrafted him. I think we nailed that. Being critical of that was fair. They just replaced him after him starting for 2 years. They were like, we don't want any more of that. And then when they took Chad Muma, it's like, what are you doing? Go get some other positions. Like, you already took Devin Lloyd. They paid Aluakun in the offseason. That one made no sense to me when there was other routes to go. And I liked Chad Muma. But he obviously doesn't really have much of a role on that team for them. So that was bad. I didn't see it in Snoop Connor. That's aged well. And then, a couple risks late in the draft. This has been a really bad draft for them. Do you check this back and be like, yeah, Devin Lloyd was a little bit better than a C, so this is more of a D- draft? Yeah, but considering what they had, the number 1 pick in the draft, and another first rounder, that's a horrible draft for the Jags. So this was proper analysis to be critical of the Jags for this one. Then we got the Titans, went C- on the A.J. Brown deal. Treylon Burks, it's been a lot of injuries. That's been tough, but we definitely felt like you trading A.J. Brown was a bad idea in general. I felt like Treylon Burks stylistically was a good path to go. Again, the injuries on Burks' side of things, but the main criticism here was like, why are you trading A.J. Brown? And that got the GM fired. So that's held up. McCreary's been better than a C+. He's been kind of an A pick, a second-round corner that's been a quality starter for them. I thought the risk on Malik Willis, him and Matt Corral were very similar. Just like, I don't really think they're good, but just in case they are with those traits, it's worth taking. I think overall my Malik Willis analysis from this year was a hit. Nicholas Petit-Frere as well, I thought was early. He's played for them, but that's been out of necessity, not because he's earned that job. Hassan Haskins, but I did love Chig. He's been a stud, late 4th round starting tight end. Love that. Kyle Phillips, when he's been healthy, he's a good slot receiver. It's just that has been super few and far between. So I think this grade is held up as a B- draft. You still walked out of this with Roger McCreary. We'll see what Petit-Frere is, and Chig Okonkwo. But definitely had some criticisms of this, and the criticisms we had for the most part were pretty solid. So I think we'll go accurate on this one with the Titans. Then you go Arizona Cardinals in the NFC West, and I gave the Hollywood trade a B. I was a little higher on that, and to be fair, when Kyler was healthy, the first year with Hollywood, things were looking pretty good there. Didn't reach a contract extension though. And then Trey McBride's been a great player. And the thing is, this is why this is tough. The reason I gave this a C- is because I hated it in addition to the first round trade for Hollywood Brown, because this was just a continuation of what ultimately got Cliff Kingsbury fired, right? Like all about the playmakers and speed and, who cares about O-line, D-line, defense? That stuff doesn't matter. That is what got Cliff Kingsbury and Steve Keim fired. And that, as a criticism of this draft, has definitely held up. And that's definitely reflected in the final grade of a C-. So I think you flip this, like the Trey McBride pick is more of a A, and the trade for Brown is more of a C- or a D. But down the rest of the board, Cam Thomas has been better than a D. Hasn't been a superstar or anything, but he's been a useful edge, so that's been a little bit better. And the rest of these guys, I didn't really see it with Keontae Ingram. A lot of late day 3 picks that it's not really worth obsessing over here. I thought Marquise Hayes had a chance. Myjai Sanders, he's not even on this team anymore. I liked him more than Cam Thomas. This one, some of my criticisms held up, but I will go inaccurate on this one just because I shouldn't have been as hard on the Trey McBride pick. Cam Thomas has been better than expected, and Sanders has been a little worse. So then we got the Rams. Not quite sure. Oh, I put the little wink there because I predicted that the Rams would take Jacoby Durant in the 4th round before the draft happened. Okay. I mean, this has been pretty down the board. This one looks like a hit to me. They didn't pick until the end of the third. I didn't really see it in Logan Bruce. Seems I was right about that. I didn't put down my draft grade there, but I think, a day 3 grade on Bruce. But yeah, Jacoby Durant's been a solid player in the 4th round. Still could emerge as a starter for them if those, if like Tre'Davious White can't stay healthy. Kyron Williams, love that pick in the 5th round. He's been a monster for them. Quentin Lake should be starting as a slot corner for them this year. I loved Quentin Lake. Russ East has had to play for them, but he hasn't been any good. So I would say, in terms of like who out of this draft class we thought were going to be the guys, we nailed it. Jacoby Durant, Kyron Williams, Quentin Lake. We were like, nope, those are the specific picks that are going to be good for them. Logan Bruce, not so much. Didn't see it there. So going to say accurate on that one for the Rams. Then we got the Niners. This was the Ty Davis Price pick. Draft, I should say. Pretty accurate here on the Niners as well. I think we'll go accurate here. So you had Drake Jackson. I thought Drake had shown some flashes. I think he got hurt last year. But they don't believe in him. The Niners, for all the things they do well, they don't always believe in the guys that they drafted. Like, they're very quick to give up on guys. And with the Niners, like, they signed like 2 edge guys this offseason that are going to eat up snaps over Drake Jackson. It's weird. Like, I thought this was a good risk to take at the end of the 2nd round. I thought he had like starting caliber traits. It's just, he's not going to get the playing time now. So that one's tough. But the Ty Davis Price, like, we slammed them for that pick. Like, we really were like, dude, that's a horrible draft pick. And it was. They didn't need him. They ended up going to get Christian McCaffrey. Like, just a complete waste of a 3rd round pick, kind of as we said. Danny Gray did feel early for me. He hasn't been much of an impact. Thought Spencer Burford could compete for starting reps. He's been a starter for them. It hasn't looked great, but he has carved his way into the starting lineup. Sam Womack's had a hard time staying healthy. Brock Purdy down the board too. Like, I know it sounds crazy in hindsight to be like, oh, that wasn't anything special of a take. Like, it was Mr. Irrelevant. You had a 6th to a 7th round grade on. You weren't that high on him. People were really low on Brock Purdy. I know when I did my quarterback rankings video, I was higher than consensus on Brock Purdy, and even going back to my quarterback rankings video, I literally went on a spiel about, like, he's perfect for a Shanahan offense with, his quick release and his game management skills. I said, I could see him having a Jimmy Garoppolo type of career. He's been even a little better than that, but I know in hindsight, you would say you weren't even high enough on Brock Purdy, but I obviously like the pick. I like the fit. I'm as proud of my Brock Purdy analysis as I think anybody could be. I haven't seen anyone that was any higher on Brock Purdy than I was, and I've seen a lot of people that were lower. So definitely a hit on the Niners there. Then we finish with the Seahawks draft grade. I gave this after the ad for the fake video game here. This one's going to be a miss. A big miss, actually. This was one of my worst draft grades. Charles Cross, that's been fine. He's been a good tackle. He hasn't been like a rock star or anything, but he's been very solid. I was low on Boye Mafe. I didn't really see it. He had a really good 2nd year. Year 1, it was looking like I was going to be right. If we did these after a year, I would have been like, see, told you, Boye Mafe wasn't going to do anything. Year 2, he really came on. I think he's going to do some really special stuff with Coach McDonald there too. Cheering for him. Local guy here out of Minnesota. I was too low on Kenneth Walker. I was a little too worried about his vision problems. And honestly, you watch Kenneth Walker, he does bounce stuff outside more than you'd like to see. He has some frustrating moments, but his physical tools are just too incredible. And he's so dynamic. So he's been better than a D+. We were right about Abraham Lucas, being a potential starter in the 3rd round. Very good pick. But I was too low on Tariq Woolen. I was way too low on Tariq Woolen. He ended up getting drafted where I had him graded, but I didn't really see it with him, and he came into the league and was like a good starter right away. So obviously whiffed on that. And then Bo Melton's been a good player. They should have kept him around. They really should have. He was awesome for Green Bay. But yeah, this is a B-. We were pretty wrong on the Seahawks. Definitely one of the worst grades we gave out. This has been an A draft for them. Then we got the Denver Broncos. They didn't pick until the end of the second round, so this was going to be a tough one. But, Nick Bonito, A-, that would stand. He has continued to show flashes. He was never going to be a high, come into the league and dominate right away, but he's a complete, high-end elite athlete, really. So I still believe in Nick Bonito. Greg Dulcich in the middle of the third round's been fine. We'll see what he can kind of do in year 2 with Sean Payton. Bo Nix, I think he's shown his flashes. That pick's been fine. Damari Mathis, he ended up starting for them, made some plays, ultimately has been kind of benched and washed out because he's just so inconsistent, and that showed at Pitt. Still, though, for a fourth-round guy, I thought he had potential to get into the starting lineup. I don't think an A grade on that has been horrible. He's exceeded what you expect from a fourth-round pick, but it hasn't been like a slam dunk either. Then you go down the board, they haven't really gotten anything else out of this draft class. I thought the risks on Turner Yell, who had a lot of athleticism, Uwazurike was a little early. That kind of aged well. I think the Broncos draft analysis has been pretty accurate. No big takes out of this draft class, but I think everything's held up pretty well there. Kansas City Chiefs, this has been pretty much bang on. This draft really, it was a big part of them getting to those Super Bowls, right? This rookie class was necessary to bring this influx of talent. I really pounded the table. Trent McDuffie is an absolute monster. I pointed out, them jumping the Bills for him could be an underrated, franchise-altering move because he's that good. George Karlaftis has been very good. Not elite, but very good. Sky Moore has not worked out for them. I am curious, though, if Rashee Rice is going to miss that time, if Sky Moore might settle in year 3, but I'm not counting on it. I wasn't the biggest fan of Brian Cook. Honestly, I thought this was early. He's been fine, but certainly not worth a second-round pick. I think you take me being right about Brian Cook as not the best second-round pick. It kind of balances out with being a little too high on Sky Moore, so I think that's fair. Leo Chanel at the end of the third round, dude, just how good he's been in the Super Bowls alone has been worth this pick. But I was a little bummed when they brought Drew Tranquill back because I was I'm ready to see Leo Chanel, man. He was my number 2 linebacker in this draft, but I had a first to a second round grade on him. And honestly, I still think he can come out and be, I think my pro comp on him was Demario Davis. I still kind of have that projection on him. It's just, he's being eased in very slowly with the Chiefs as their third linebacker. He still plays a lot, though, because he's that good. I will admit I was too low on the combination of those corners, Josh Williams and Jalen Watson, and Isaiah Pacheco. I was wrong on those guys, so that one does hurt a little bit. There's some hits and some misses. They have all these draft picks. That's inevitably going to happen. I think for the most part, this has been an A-plus draft, as I said. I don't think they win 2 straight Super Bowls without this draft class. So I think for the most part, we're going to go accurate on this, with just being too low on really this combination of corners and Isaiah Pacheco as well. You could make a case I had enough misses there to go the other way. So we'll see if we get a chance to go the other side of the coin if something's close. But Raiders didn't have a lot of picks here. They go Dylan Parham. Love that pick in the third round. Thought he was a potential starter. Zamir White. Yep, he's going to be starting for them. He's a stud. I thought for what they had there, they nailed those picks. Neil Farrell hasn't been an impact for them, so kind of whiffed there. Neither is Matthew Butler, but that's late 5th round for a defensive tackle prospect. Thayer Munford's been better than I thought he would be. So this one's tough. There wasn't a lot of picks, but we really liked Parham and Zamir White. I think that's fair to say this was accurate on that one. And then the last one, the Chargers. This one's going to be a miss, it would seem. I was super high on Zion Johnson. He's been fine-ish, but I was just way too high on him. He was one of my favorite picks in the first round. JT Woods, was worth the risk. They're betting on speed there in the third round. Process-wise, it was fine. He still has time to do some stuff, I suppose. Went around where I thought he would go. Isaiah Spiller, I will say I was right to push back on the Isaiah Spiller hype. I don't even know if I think he was on the back end of my top 10 running backs. I had a 4th round grade on him. It's where he ended up going, but a lot of people thought he was a day 2 option. I was like, I didn't see it with Isaiah Spiller. I was definitely, that would be one of those guys when I talk about my consensus rankings, kind of straying from consensus on some of these guys. That helped me out. Tito Ogbonnia was a project. Jamari Sawyer, though, I did love the Jamari Sawyer pick. I'm kind of feeling like this was more accurate than not now that I look back on it. It's not like Zion Johnson's been a bust. I was right about Isaiah Spiller being more of a backup. And then Jamari Sawyer as a 6th round guy probably makes up for the difference on Zion Johnson. So, I don't know. I think I actually would flip this and say this was accurate. This has been a B-plus draft. You get a starting tackle in the 6th round. You didn't have a 2nd round pick. You get a starting guard who's, I think, still has better football ahead of him. So, and Sawyer, he saved that rookie year because Rashawn Slater went down. Like, even if that's all they get out of him is how good he was as a rookie. But they kicked him into guard and he wasn't as good. But I don't think there's any reason to believe if they were to play him at tackle that he couldn't be, a really valuable backup to have there. So, yeah, I think I'm going to flip that and say accurate on the Chargers draft. And we ultimately, I have here 21 and 13. Wait, is that right? 21 and 12. So I must have double counted something in there. Probably when I changed grades on something there. But ballpark about 2 out of 3, which is what we were looking for on these, to be like, if you're going to say draft grades don't matter and we do this exercise in 2 out of 3 times, it's pretty damn close. Like, I'm pretty proud of that as a draft analyst. So I will continue to do draft grades. I find them, super fun. Some people don't. That's fine. That's your prerogative. But, sorry I didn't get the final tally exactly right. Maybe when I'm editing this up, I'll keep track of it again and put the graphic on there right now, what the actual record was. But if you followed along and graded my grades with me, let me know how I did in your perspective. Thank you so much for watching. This was a long one, but this one's for the diehards anyway, so you guys don't mind. Next video will be the deep dives, the number 32 team being revealed. Another thing to drop in the comments down below. Who do you think is going to come in as the lowest ranked team for me next year for the deep dive series? But thank you so much for watching. Please hit that like button on the way out, and we'll see you very soon. Peace out.